Hi, I'm Rigger, this is You're Right, and we should talk about eyes, arms, and hounds. Before all that though, be sure to like it if you like it, share it if you think others would like it, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more. Now, I think it's time we have a chat about this whole Grimm situation. Structurally, this video might be a little shaky because I'm not exactly sure how I want to approach these points. Now, we have this hound information that's just come up. It really brought some of this discussion to the forefront, and there's many clashing opinions about all of these ideas. Obviously, I'm just one paper cutout, and my opinions are entirely my own. I am not the be-all and end-all of the entire discussion. But, that being said, I do have my own opinions, the same as everyone else, so let's have a quick chat. To start this off, let's talk about Silver Eyes. Silver Eyes for me have always been kind of minor. For so long, it was a MacGuffin to get them out of impossible situations, and everyone was screaming at RWBY for not asking more questions about it, for not trying to learn to use it, from the others not telling her things that they might know, people like Crow, etc. I kinda wasn't. Sometimes it did feel like an obvious thing that was sort of left off the questions list, but I knew once it was explained properly it was going to start becoming really important, and I wasn't too excited for it to become important. I know that story structure wise, that if you're giving your pure heart hero, this main character, a special ability that's basically a legend, and we find out that her idol figure of her mother also had it, and then we found out it literally comes from God, then yeah, it's gonna be a huge deal. Every fanfic and every fan theory I saw for years centered so heavily around Silver Eyes being the key to everything. Frankly, I found it really boring as a line of thinking. Not that it may not be true, that's kind of the problem, it's an easy crutch to lean on. They're just special. Bam. Special ability. They have a secret I win beam and it makes them more resilient to bad guys' effects and they're just born to be awesome. But since I find it very boring and very predictable and basically too easy from a writing standpoint, I am always happy when it got more and more restrictions and less play in the story. It only affects Grimm. Awesome. So the henchmen and stuff are safe and still a threat. That's good. And RWBY has a great deal of trouble using it since it's tied to a very specific emotional state that's hard to use on command. It's not just like anger or something. Great. Also awesome, makes it so much harder to use. And you've somewhat justified its, position as a MacGuffin because it just comes in when you need it. It's not just an auto I win button. These are positives to me. Then it wasn't strong enough to kill one of these enormous enemies too, and that's just more wins. But I recognize the counter-argument is then why have it? If it's not going to be special, why is it in your story? If it's not useful and special, then why is it there? And that's my thoughts exactly. I wouldn't have it, so it's something I'm frankly happy is underused. If it was my story, she wouldn't have Silver Eyes, they wouldn't exist. That puts me in the minority, at least the vocal minority. Trust me, because I see everyone, reactors, theorists, fanfics, fan art, comments, the phrase Silver Eyes appears so much. And I'm not surprised, obviously, that's what happens when you put in an element like this that's sort of mysterious and you don't really address it. The fan theories simply adjust over time as the new info comes out, which is also fair. And it's a constant one, that it'll be the key to winning against Salem. The one I see right now is all over the place, it'll burn the Grimm out of her, and we get human Salem back. Okay, I see the sort of logic. I mean, it doesn't usually have a burning effect, more petrification, though the vaporize thing, yeah. We vaporize all the Grimm out, and because she's an immortal, she can live. I'm absolutely not going to say that it won't happen, or that I don't see the logical steps, because I do. But I am going to say that I don't like it. That's personal preference. It's not that I don't like the ideas of the theory, like I said, they all add up. I don't like if we do that. I personally really disagree with that as the plot. And more importantly, as the answer. I don't like beating the final boss involving inherent special powers you were born with. I'd rather it be more clever than that, using things we learned along the way, or some, new perspective on things. I know she learned how to use the ability along the way, but understand, we now know Salem has had direct contact with other Silver-Eyed people, competent Silver-Eyed people. So the fact none of them have been able to do any kind of damage to that level means RWBY again would have to be the super special best ever at it of all time. And I just don't like that. And we can see she's not that great at it, so suddenly she's going to go from barely able to use it, not even to a competent level like Maria was, to being the bestest ever of all time who can take down the ultimate. So if we're already at this stage by, volume 8, that jump's gonna feel silly, and I just don't like it. It also makes the idea of the dip in the Grimm pools so flimsy. it seems to have tied to Salem's soul herself. It's changed who she is. It's after she was an immortal who can recover from any damage. So it doesn't even count as damage. It's like, it's a godly influence. It's actually one of the things I like about Salem, is people go, oh, the god of light was so mean for what he did, and he was. But Salem isn't just a being of the god of light. She is a horrific amalgamation of both pools that is only possible through her. Both gods, both being elements that can't just be taken away. You can't just destroy her immortality, and you can't just destroy her Grimm influence. Which is where the hard counter to that argument is that the ability from Silver Eyes we now know comes from a god, so if anything can do it, it's probably that, right? And yeah, I mean, there's a logic to that thinking, but again, I just don't like it. And it's not that I think you're wrong, I just don't like that train of thought. But, if, let's say I was correct, if people were thinking along my way, if the writers were thinking my way and they weren't doing that, it does raise the point of, well, what do we do with Silver Eyes then? What is their payoff? What's their role? And I'd like to say I have a fantastic answer for you, and I don't. If it's not Salem, then what? I can see RWBY using it to freeze Salem repeatedly in a battle. Be interesting. Like trying to stall her out, but she keeps recovering. It sounds kinda lame when I say it like that, but not in my head. I see it a lot more dramatic. That Salem is bearing down on her, about to kill her, and her friends are in trouble, needing to be saved, and all she's left to do is sort of spam Silver Eyes, which she can sort of do at that point, but she just freezes and then recovers, and freezes and recovers, and she's just delaying the inevitable as it encroaches on her, building to some crescendo. But I also do like the idea of Silver Eyes as cleansers. I will admit that. The burning away the Hound's shell of them for, just a moment, of ridding the land of blight, like we saw with the apathy. So I suppose I should be more open to the idea of it also cleansing Salem, but part of me feels that's just too boring. The only real advantage I can see to that is I would be curious if quote-unquote good Salem, without the thirst for destruction, if she was just as bad, right? Is this the Grimm pool's influence on her, or is she really, because she was already twisted a bit, vengeful at least, when she was human, and then we have all this Grimm pool's influence, and they did mention that it changed, she's a being with a desire for pure destruction. If we took that away, would she still continue, if she's back to human? I can see that. That would be how I'd do it. If RWBY's eyes are going to cleanse Salem, then it shouldn't change her. She should lose her Grimm powers and still just be her. That would be really interesting. That would be the only way I'm okay with it. Again, I don't have a great, zing answer. I wanted to discuss the topic, and that's all I'll say on it. That, if we're burning the Grimm out of her, fine, take away her Grimm, control, but still have her be, an immortal, master mage that can, with eons of experience who wants to kill you, something like that. But since we're on the topic, we'll transition to the next point. Let's talk about Cinder and this arm. So here we go. This is Rigger making everyone mad because I now need to go into more very popular fan theories that I really don't like. Cinder will be controlled by this Grimm. Also later that Cinder will become a Hound/Hound equivalent, a half living being / Grimm. Now, the Silver Eyes cleansing Salem, I don't really like it still. But I wouldn't be super mad at it because I can see the reasoning, and it's not unfair. These, however, I really dislike. In fact, I kind of hate these Cinder theories. Not because the idea in general is bad, or it's not that it's illogical, I see the steps. Salem turning her failed generals into mindless servants too is a horrible idea that I can get behind. But the idea of it being Cinder feels like a bigger waste of character than anything that's ever been done with her, and I really don't want that for her, as a character. For it to come true, she really was that much of a waste. For volumes and volumes and volumes. To say that there is a groundswell of hate for Cinder in the fandom is an understatement. I see so many people cheering when she's in danger, telling her to just die already, and complaining about her constantly. Now, I'm not going to say that I love what they do with her, but I think what's more important than anything is what she represents. She's the first real boss. No matter what you think of her, it was that she was on this ship in the first episode. The fact that she did this at the turning point of our entire series. It puts her character almost above all else in terms of importance with what we do with her and where we go from here. She will never not be important, and that includes to the characters, not just the plot. If you take a constant piece of her, a constant piece of our rival in this story, and you reduce her down, you make her a literal mindless puppet of just the big bad in the background, then it reduces all of her actions to pointless, and it removes the catharsis from our heroes. It means killing her will either be an act of mercy, who is going to be satisfied in the end with them giving Cinder a mercy, or a nothing act of just fighting another basically super boss Grimm. Also completely unsatisfying, putting her on the level of the spit bug. Another Grimm to kill. So what? You remove the chance of them talking to each other, of Cinder perhaps begging for her life, or refusing to change, or doing something else, something heroic, or something horrible. You rob all of that emotion. You won't get your satisfying relief and payoff. Cinder's arm is a weird piece of storytelling. Currently, nothing it's done has worked out. Using it to suck aura and eventually maiden powers to ensure a safe transfer is a good idea in theory, but until we see it succeed, it won't be paid off. But I'm actually hopeful that's going to happen soon. She had a proto version, and she used that successfully, and then she failed with it twice, so third time's the charm for a satisfying payoff and for a huge power upgrade to Cinder, thank God. That pays off and makes sense. It being used against Cinder as a weakness also works. It's not protected by aura, it's clearly very painful for it to grow it back, and these are great tools to combat her, especially if we build her power level. If she gets more maiden powers, she needs weaknesses to exploit. It also is a good representation of just what she's willing to give up on this quest for power. And it does give her a weakness to RWBY. RWBY has a hard counter to her no matter how strong she gets. But then I see all these ominous comments about Cinder's Grimm arm creeping higher, and See, I like it as a method of control too. I do like that. We've seen Salem lean on it to make her shriek in pain using the arm's presence. I like that because it keeps Cinder under Salem's thumb in an evil way, not mind control. It's more that Salem could just kill her. And Cinder's active personality is that she's very much not comfortable with people in power ordering her around and being controlled. See, it's not satisfying when she has no way to combat her control. It's worse that she exists with her full thoughts, but is forced to do certain things because of something that she can't get rid of. Now she has an inbuilt method of control and pain on her, like in her childhood, not in her brain, so she doesn't have a choice. I've said with the Penny story how much I dislike the fight to overcome the thing in your mind with willpower. I find it really played out and hokey. I just hate the trope of, you're really still in there, you're still good, I know it. It felt forced when Luke Skywalker was doing it at the start of the 80s, and that wasn't even mind control. I like it being a more violent method and less choice involved, but still having an active brain to think about it and contemplate what's led you here. In the story, it also works a little bit like Murphy's fourth directive in RoboCop. If you move against the one in charge, you get an automatic shutdown. In this case, it's if you move against Salem, she just activates torture mode, or maybe tries to have the hand kill you, something crazy, right? It's a nice, evil enough way for her to operate without it burrowing into her brain and robbing away her actual character that's so important for the rest of our characters to interact with. The only way, and I mean the only way, I'd be somewhat alright with it, is if we get an act of mercy from RWBY, but it isn't death. This is where she can burn it out and get Cinder back. But the fact of the matter is, in that scenario, it's in her brain, and you're saying you're having RWBY burn it out, and Cinder is not an immortal, and she'd absolutely die. So it feels like BS if you were to somehow do it, right? However, if it doesn't go to her brain, if it's just how it is now, and Cinder has to beg RWBY to use her eyes on her on purpose, to release her, to do what she once did against her that made Cinder hate her like no one else, to burn the Grimm out of her, losing her arm again, and probably taking more damage as well to the rest of her body with the rest of the Grimm influence that's in there, and returning her through great pain to an injured state to just become a person again. Now that could be something. I'm not gonna lie to you, I have a video idea for a long time, about killing Cinder and the circumstances there and what we might do, and I might save further discussions around this idea for there. But my point is, it's important to keep Cinder's personality alive and have her able to make choices. You keep the Cinder we know there. You can give her an arc. It could be a redemption, it could just be that she's evil, whatever. It could be she ends up turning good, it doesn't matter. It's okay for this to end up with just a straight up fight to the death because she's the bad guy one last time. It's perfectly fine, but turning Cinder mindless robs us of that. And not just RWBY, but Jean. People get annoyed at him as a character, sure, and he's not the best all the time, but this means a whole lot to this plot. This kicked off our big turning point. This is huge, and say what you want, Jean is another main character of this story. And plot-wise, you're taking it away from all of them, turning Cinder into just a puppet. It makes all of this journey unresolved, and I can't support that line of thinking. But lastly, we'll head over to our third topic. It's sort of a transition, I guess. The Hound. Speaking of mindless. See, the Hound and Cinder's arm are kind of interesting because they do kind of raise interesting contradictions in ideas. It actually makes me think this Grimm parasite here was created based on research with the Hound project. What I mean is that there has been a debate about this guy being a silver-eyed person. Not whether he is or isn't, because anyone who's looked has seen it's confirmed, like on Twitter and from he's a silver-eyed person. But I've seen floating around whether perhaps it's relevant or if it's just a coincidence. And, I can't believe it's a coincidence, guys. This show is so careful and sparse with silver-eyed characters, they never randomly turn up. And I've heard creative frustration at some points during the story because there have been clips of older RWBY that made people think certain characters were silver-eyed due to like color transfer issues and technical stuff. Like people thought Winter might be because of some of her shots in Volume 3, I believe. But if they put in an actual silver-eyed person, which they confirmed is an actual silver-eyed person, and then of course they immediately kill them off, so there can't be any like discussion, they can't be of any use to the plot, you know, you can't get anything out of them, it's safe to say it's pretty relevant. I've said it makes sense to me. The Hound is a reflection of Salem herself, that dynamic I talked about between the two gods. Salem exists as a combination of light and darkness, the god of light and the god of darkness, infinite life and pure destruction. Take this concept and attempt to replicate it. You have something like the Grimm pools that if a person jumped into it would be completely obliterated, destroyed instantly. Just utterly annihilated. It is destruction. So what you do is you find these silver-eyed people with an inherent ability in their bloodline to combat Grimm, to repel destruction, preservation, something that comes from the god of creation. And then you introduce a destructive force from those Grimm pools and you can find a balance in the middle. Like I deduced long before it was revealed, the Hound is basically just venom. And it's a decent idea to make this easy to understand at least. The Grimm being introduced is like a parasite, but it completely destroys its host. Except if there's a silver-eyed person, where their inherent ability to destroy it back levels it out and it becomes symbiotic. Two things existing alongside each other because neither can completely destroy the other. It holds itself right on that edge, which surely makes its existence very painful as well, so you know, that's lovely. The body itself is basically totally wrecked, retaining the brain enough to take orders and act with a little bit of thought and intelligence. This would have taken experimentation on Salem's part, no doubt. I weep for the failed subjects, though perhaps not more than I do for the successful ones. It'd make sense to me that this would then lead to this Grimm parasite's creation, able to use the Grimm's aura draining in a measured way, so as not to destroy the host it's going to join with. It's why when I saw the Grimm Hound have silver eyes, I was so happy, because it meant Cinder couldn't become one, and I hope that remains true. She can't because she doesn't have silver eyes, and the Grimm parasite that is already part of her is only able to do so because it was created with this idea in mind. Because that was a thing for a long time and I still see it around is, how long until the parasite gets to her brain? You know, how long until she's taken over? But as far as I can tell, it kinda has, or at least physically. I mean, it got to one of her eyes at least. She lost her left eye and her left arm to the silver eyes. It wasn't a physical burning, it was working on her as if she was Grimm because of the parasite in her system. If anything, the eye she lost was slightly more protected from her hair, if that counts at all, against the brightness itself, so it wasn't just burned out because everything went white. And yeah, the arm as well. She still has the mark on her back, but if anything, the Grimm parasite in her was probably pretty harmed, so this full arm replacement is probably more a repair and extension on the initial parasite from Salem. Sit down and grow it out and, you know, give it more form, and it probably, you know, helps restore that mostly destroyed bits of Cinder's body where that Grimm parasite resided. Not to mention, it works as a weapon to help her ensure safe transfer of more powers. I'd almost be willing to bet there was some kind of plan, at least maybe on Salem's side, to give her some kind of, you know, limb like this or alteration like this to her body for that to be possible moving forward after she got full anyway. The point being that this arm is likely tied to the parasite, and the parasite would have to be created in a measure to not overtake someone's brain, to not completely overtake a person, because an uncontrolled introduction of Grimm like that would obliterate a person, and the only person who can stop it, as we see with the Hounds, is someone with silver eyes, which Cinder is not. Cinder is just a person. She'd be instantly destroyed introducing Grimm to her system, at least one that wasn't built to not take her over specifically. And since it is Grimm, we can use it in the story because Salem can flex on it, having it turn against Cinder and torture her, etc. And as we may have thought, perhaps somewhat tracking her to a degree. Sure, maybe it's a stretch of thinking that I hold out for this, and it's something that's going to take Cinder over eventually and turn her into a puppet or like another Hound. I can't stand here and pretend it's not possible. Just know that I'll be disappointed in it for the reasons stated, and these are my hopes as to why it may not happen. Also, at the end of this, I want to very depressingly tie back into this thought. There is the Summer Rose connection that obviously has gained a lot more evidence and teasers as we go now. And if you haven't seen the newest episode, then there's... Anyway, but lots of people say she shouldn't come back as one of these beings. Firstly, let's just get this clear. This guy was ravaged, almost completely destroyed, and seemingly everything apart from his head and brain was skeletal remains in there. His life seemed like constant agony with no free will. So, if Summer is one of these things, even if it's a more advanced version of this that's slightly better at not wrecking everyone, she won't be, you know, quote-unquote, back. And if she's not back as one of these things but was used to one, it's a lovely mental image to just tell Ruby and Yang that their mum spent what was a decent part of their life being horribly experimented on in a dungeon until she either died of overwhelming excruciating destruction, or she then was successful and served as a mindless minion for many years until someone else just randomly killed her. Oh well. None of these results are happy endings at all. Just wanted to point that out for anyone who thinks it's way too convenient Summer's coming back as one of these Grimm. From what we've seen from the inside of the Hound, we almost wouldn't want that. The release of death sounds better. As it stands, it really appears that if you used a full silver-eyed blast on the Hound, or at being similar, and it couldn't get away, and you burned away its entire shell, you'd be left with basically just a head and a skeleton, at which point it would probably instantly die with nothing to function off of. So, that's wonderfully horrific. You know, I won't lie to you, there is like a deep, dark part of my storytelling likes that kind of likes the idea that silver eyes aren't the answer to everything, and the best it can earn you is a lifetime in the servitude of Salem. That your great fix that's definitely gonna fix everything really is just a one-way ticket to a doomed fate. Not that I think that will happen to RWBY. That would be incredibly dark. If, like, they end up taking her, she becomes a hound creature and her friends have to kill her before the end. Like, that's not gonna happen. That'd be so dark and different and way off base for the tone of the show. But I do like the idea that, no, your great promised gift, you know, the most it's ever got anyone, is this horrible fate. You know, part of me prefers that, so that it isn't our final answer and we find it elsewhere. Lovely depressing ending here. While all these talks here are theoretical, I just wanted to discuss my perspective on them, and what I hope to see, so that's really what this video was. I know there might be some disagreement with me about the specifics of how this works, but I think this all adds up to make kind of sense. Keeping Cinder as a character who can change, interact, and have payoff, whilst keeping Silver Eyes important and useful, are things we really should look out for. But I do just really hope Silver Eyes aren't the answers to everything, and what we've seen with the Hound means that even if Summer is around, they won't be just the answer to it, because look at the situation they'd be left in anyway. As for the Silver Eyes and Salem part, that's just personal preference, but I wanted to mention it in a video anyway, and I'm sure plenty of people disagree with me. But until next time, remember, if your counter to my points here is that Salem wants to make Cinder a walking puppet final boss with a combination of all the powers, and how cool would that be? That means Salem's plan is to make Cinder Deadpool from X-Men Origins. So cool. Till next time, my name is Rigger. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I did alright.